Namaskara. Can I bring it? Namaskara. Before I begin, I must thank all the organizers for making Pravah happen, to make it a reality, because I'm aware of the kind of amazing work that has gone behind the scene and right in front of you. Today, the topic which I have chosen, self-inquiry in process work, it's basically a lot of my own inner rumblings. It is a lot of my quest that I've had over the years of process work journey. But I've had this need to validate it through, combining it with maybe stories from mythology, or to kind of validate it from scriptures or the Vedas. So one may ask if process work is all about self-inquiry into one's patterns of the mind, into the emotional realm, into your thought, feeling, belief, action, then what is this self-inquiry all about? And a very valid question for that. So I would like to respond with one question, which is the question taken from the first verse of Kena Upanishad, which says, Kenishitam patati preshitam manaha, which basically literally translates into, by whose will or direction does the mind throw light on the objects? So that's the premise on which my paper is based. Of course, like as the teacher of the Upanishad, the question was asked by a disciple who was in search of the truth to his guru. And the guru, in a typical Upanishad style, doesn't give a direct answer. And he says, it is the mind of the mind. And not a very helpful answer in today's context. But basically what he refers to is, it is the witness of the mind. And if you look at the nature of this self, which is being inquired, this self is very different from the known and beyond the unknown. So there's no language to define it. There is no definition. It is not explanatory in nature, but it is definitely experiential in nature. And I think that's the conviction with which I felt I can put things together to present the paper. Of course, this self which is being inquired has got a lot of names. Often it can confuse people. So it's sometimes called Purusha, it's called Brahman, it is called the spirit, it is called the self, it is called the pure infinite consciousness, a whole lot of names. So to begin with, my personal journey with process work started. I came across process work as a part of my job, where it was mandatory for all teachers to go through it. Of course, I had a whole lot of questions about why, what, how is it connected, and I think I did kind of ask a whole lot of people, and many of them are privy to it who are here also. But over the years, I really took to it well because of two things. One, it was enabling, and two, it was empowering for me as a person and me in my role, especially that of an educator. I did realize that going through process work brought in a different quality to the person who was teaching, brought in a different quality of interaction with children, with parents. It brought a different worldview. It helped to bring an expansiveness. And I can relate it to Pravaha, which is about expansiveness. The interesting part of process work was that I got to work with the process work through different lenses. So be it through the lens of psychology, be it through the lens of culture, which was very interesting, be it through the lens of ecology, the nature's principle, be it through the lens of mythology. But a couple of patterns that I did notice in each of it was three things that I could connect. One, of course, was this expansiveness. I did feel a psychological space within me while going through different kind of lenses. The second aspect which I was in touch with was a cognitive shift in my worldview. And of course, the third was a deeper interconnection. To give you an example, working with process work through the nature's principle, to one of the cognitive shift that I had in my mind was from the perspective of what I always thought as I'm a part of nature to I am nature. I thought that was a huge shift because the way it helped me to look at the ecosystem, the way it helped me to look at what principles applies to nature applies to me. And I think one of my favorite is dung is manure. It applies to me too. I think one of the things, as I was working with all these lenses, I also got in touch with the fact that there was a missing link or a thread which was not connected, because I also saw that there were times when, especially when I would have this real anger or hurt, and I would wonder, what is it that is triggering this anger or hurt? And reflecting, I did feel that it had a lot to do with this ego of mine, which held a certain image of mine with such closeness, which was actually a trigger for those kind of strong emotions. So I felt there was something beyond all this which I need to look from the spiritual angle too. So that is what helped me to kind of look at how do I connect with the spiritual system of self-inquiry. I also thought that, India being a country with so much of knowledge and so much of documented knowledge of the seekers of the truth, there's enough and more literature on that how do we tap into this knowledge which is there, which is available to us. That is when I also came across two things, which is my theory, which I feel brought the split between. So two things which I felt which influenced this split between just not matter and mind, but also mind and the spirit. One, of course, I think Sita already spoke about Descartes' theory, the French philosopher, who actually said that I think, therefore I am. But he also went on to say something that all that is measurable is truth. And because of which, a lot of things which are measurable has got validated. So if you look at in reality, there is consciousness, there is thought. And thought is measurable because you can assess a person by thoughts, but consciousness cannot. And somewhere I felt consciousness got slipped through this fragment of, the split between the mind and the spirit. The second, which I think I recently got to read a book by Vandana Shiva, who talks about the monoculture of mind, wherein she talks about how certain things are erased from one's cognition by first by making it disappear, and then later on making it invalidate. So that is where I felt there was this split that happened, wherein this consciousness didn't have a place in any kind of behavioral science. So while I was reading these aphorisms by Dr. Pulan Garg, three things which really stayed with me. One was the recognition of the potency of residues, which distorted the modes of relatedness and expression. And the second was at the loosening of the hold of the residues. So I was also intrigued by the fact that, yes, we do work with the potency of the residues. Do we also see what is the cause or the root cause behind these residues? How does it form? So there was one thing which I definitely found out was that we need to understand our mind. The mind and the kleshas. So kleshas are basically the default patterns of our own mind. So I think Patanjali Sutras, in fact, he's got a whole lot of sutras. He talks about 5 kleshas or default patterns of the mind, of which the first one is about ignorance of our true self. And the fact that the mind is, it's naturally directed to see things outside because our senses are also directed outside. But that being as one of the main reason, which is behind the fact that it is called avidya. Avidya is the first klesha, which actually means deep blindness. And of course, others have also spoken about Prakriti and Purusha, wherein it talks about reality as Purusha and Prakriti, where mind is also part of Prakriti. And the essence of Prakriti is also Purusha. But I was also looking at this doctrine of simultaneous creation, wherein it is very clear that the mind is the place, the field of experience. Mind is also the tool with which you work, and mind is also the goal. But the doctrine of simultaneous creation talks about the fact that the world is perceived only by the appearance of the I thought, and the world is constructed in one's own mind. So the I thought or the I am thought has a lot of significance in what kind of world I construct and what is the perception through which I see the world. And of course, the perception is contributed by a whole lot of factors which we all are aware of. The mind being a real monkey business, it's not an easy game. So one thing which the Patanjali Sutra talks about, that Vishya and Ashraya is basically, Vishya talks about the locus of the problem is where the application of the solution needs to happen. So if you look at the Vishya, the ignorance of our true self lies in the intellect. And the application of knowing oneself also is the Ashraya, which needs to happen there. So the journey of self-inquiries basically starts from the I thought, or rather the I am thought, to I. So there's a very famous character from Mahabharata, Dhritarashtra. I think I consider him as my guru, not for the right reasons. But he was one person, if you look at his name also, Dhrit means to clutch on, and Rashtra is about the kingdom. And Dhritarashtra was blind because he was completely identified with his possession. I think we have a whole lot of Dhritarashtra in us. When we hold on to something which is we hold it with such dearness, there is a blindness which comes, a metaphorical blindness which comes. So self-inquiry is also about loosening that hold with which we hold anything with so much of preciousness. So as they say, there are a whole lot of approaches. One of the approaches is the Jnana Yoga, which is the yoga of knowledge. And this particular approach, the Drigdrishya Vivekam, is about the seer and the seen. So it actually helps us to see the self or the indefinable self. So it actually takes you through 4 steps. The first step is about how I see a whole lot of objects, and the eyes is a seer and everything else is a seen. And the next step is when my mind sees the eye, my mind knows that, I cannot see things clearly, or my power is not as good, or, my eyesight was much better. My mind knows something. The mind is different. The mind is a seer, and my eyes is the seen. The third step which leads to is where I can see the mind. I know I'm happy. I know I'm angry. I know I'm irritated. I know I can remember. I know I understand this. I know I do not understand a whole lot of things. Now the mind becomes the scene, and there is a seer. And that seer cannot be seen anymore because it is a witness and it is not an object of knowledge. So this approach of Drishya Vivekam is basically an approach through the yoga of knowledge to just to tell us what the self is. But information and knowledge is not enough. That's the next step where he talks about there are 3 steps for self-inquiry, which is about Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. So Shravana is just the first step when you get to know who you are. The Manana is when you are able to reflect and understand who you are. And Nididhyasana is about when you are able to reflect and meditate and internalize this knowledge. Because I think a whole lot of seekers of truth from this land have told us that the root cause for suffering is the ignorance of the true self. So basically the idea was to combine process work where one is which looks at recognizing the potency of the residues which actually distort expression. Through self-inquiry, the objective was to look at also the cause which is reason for this problem. The second was to look at the loosening or the hold of the residues. Here it was more about looking at how do you integrate systems, because there is obviously, if you look at the tenets of process work from the Sankhya philosophy, the first 2 being the seeing the unseen and articulating the inarticulate, which comes under the first part of recognizing. And the second part, which is about owning the disowned and acting out the withheld, comes under it can be actually equated to loosening of the residues, but also using self-inquiry wherein you recognize your true self. So that was the end, but I just wanted to, I think there was a little story which I wanted to share about this whole self-inquiry, wherein there is the story of Kirti Mukha. So if you look at in front of Shiva temples, there is this face of Kirti Mukha, which is basically an indication of the requirement to dissolve oneself, of one's ego self, to go beyond. So the story talks about how there was this demon who had become very powerful and challenges Shiva to say that, give Parvati to me. And Shiva gets angry and he creates another asura to actually eat up this demon. By then, the first demon, he understands his mistake and goes to Shiva and asks for forgiveness, wherein he is blessed and he is forgiven. But by then, the other asura was produced and he was a lean and hungry fellow. So he says, what now? I need to eat. You created me, I have to eat. So Shiva says, eat yourself. And he starts eating from his feet upwards. So the symbol of this character eating him up till here is a symbol of the requirement of dissolving our ego to recognize our true self. Thank you.